Hey guys, it's Mr. Shalou. How you doing? So I want to continue where we left off. We were talking about the Great Depression with the stock market collapse and the bank failures and massive unemployment and Herbert Hoover really doing absolutely nothing to solve the crisis, government not taking enough action, relying on rugged individualism and private charities. So it was too little, too late. Hoover had no solutions. So today we are going to be looking at a different vision, a new deal for America, and what the goal and expectation was to try to get America out of the Great Depression. So let's start by first looking at Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Roosevelt is a very interesting character. He was related to Teddy Roosevelt, so he has a very popular family name. He was already well known back in 1920. He ran for vice president. And the following year, after he obviously lost in 1920, he developed polio. And that leaves him paralyzed from the waist down. He is in a wheelchair. What's interesting about this is that most of the American public had no idea that he was paralyzed. The media was much different back in the 1920s and 1930s than they are today. They really did a lot of work to make sure that it was not publicized that FDR was physically handicapped. There's a stigma attached to people that are handicapped. I know it's not a politically correct thing to say, but the reality of the situation is he never would have been elected president. There would be too many people, even in 2020, it would be the same situation where people would look at his physical limitation as being a knock against his leadership ability. That's obviously not the case, but the reality is a lot of people are not very smart in the United States. So what does this mean for FDR when he develops polio? Well, he spends a number of years trying to make things not as severe as they are. He goes to Warm Springs, Georgia. He tries to pretty much do every physical therapy method there is. And when he actually runs for president in 1932, he's going to try to hide the fact that he's handicapped. He'll have people help him to podiums. He has very special weighted shoes with leg braces attached to them so that he can actually remain upright and look like he's standing when in fact all of the weight is being carried by the leg braces. He also had a very special car developed for him to be able to drive. So instead of having foot pedals, he actually had bars on the steering wheel that would either brake or give gas so that it looked like he was driving when in reality everything was on the steering wheel and being able to drive in that way. So a lot of tricks. And the reason I bring this up is that FDR is a very special individual. He goes above and beyond because he is a great thinker. He's really a genius, probably one of the smartest presidents we've ever had. And he was willing to do whatever it took in order to be successful. And you're going to see that with his plan. He gets the nomination in 1932 for the Democrats. He has a new deal for the American people, something very different than what Hoover and his people were trying to do. Instead of the government being laissez-faire, hands-off, FDR said that the government needs to help the people. The whole purpose of government is to work of, for, and by the people. And if the people need them during a time of economic crisis, the government needs to step in and take direct action. He wins the election. As you can see from the map, it's pretty obvious. Other than like New England, he's going to very easily win the presidency here. He gives a very famous speech when he gets inaugurated. It is probably the most well-known of the inaugural addresses in American history, where he says, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." And that's a really important phrase, not just for the Great Depression, but you can actually look at the current climate in the United States and around the world. There's a lot of fear about what's happening right now with coronavirus. There's a lot of things that people are not really hopeful for. They don't see a lot of optimism. And what FDR was saying during the Great Depression, which still applies to today, is the worst thing that's going to come out of this situation is that people lose their faith. People lose their trust in our society. If we get away from the fear that is driving us, the fear that is consuming our everyday lives, if we can move past that, then we as a people can overcome any obstacle. We have shown time and time again as a society that America is always willing to meet a challenge and overcome the obstacles that are facing us. You can look at the American Revolution. You can look at the Civil War. You can look at the development of the country throughout the 1800s, the reform movements, the technological innovations, all of the challenges that we have ever faced as a country. When we put our fear to the side, we have been able to overcome those obstacles. And so that is what FDR is trying to say here at the inauguration in 1933, that when America stops worrying about this depression, gets out of its depression, essentially, we will overcome, the economy will recover, and we will be stronger for it. FDR has a plan. He's not just giving this words for trying to comfort the American people. He literally has a comprehensive plan, probably a better plan going into the presidency than any previous president. The first 100 days in office, he is going to pass more legislation. He's going to propose, and eventually it's going to get passed, more legislation than any previous president. He decides that he's going to create what's known as the brain trust, not just a cabinet that's going to be responsible for all the executive departments, but all of the greatest thinkers in the United States in any field that is needed to upstart the economy. So you have a lot of college professors, a lot of economics experts, a lot of people that are the leaders of their industries are all going to be brought together in the White House, and they're going to create these New Deal programs for the country as a whole. Now, what's interesting is that it's not just old white guys that he's selecting. It's really the leading experts in all of the fields, and that includes Frances Perkins, the first female cabinet member. He's not going to conform to the standards that every previous president had. He's going to literally pick the people that are best qualified to lead us through this crisis and get rid of all of the preconceived discriminations that have always existed within society. So that's a big positive for FDR. The very first act that he is going to take is he's going to shut down all of the banks in the United States. I think I mentioned yesterday, I'm pretty sure, or not yesterday, but the first section, that the real economic collapse takes place when the banks close, when you have 5,000 bankruptcies, which may make thousands upon thousands of people lose their life savings. FDR targets the banking system as the first major objective to restarting the economy. He declares a bank holiday where all of the banks in the country are going to be closed for 4 days. They're going to be given a stress test where if they have enough financial backing where they can restart and make sure that they can cover everyone's bank accounts, those banks are going to be allowed to be reopened. The banks that close, the people that had money in those banks will be guaranteed by the government to get their money back. And from that point onward, they're going to create what's known as the Emergency Banking Relief Act, which is going to create the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. From this point onward, every bank account is going to be guaranteed by the government up until $250,000. So anybody that has money in the banks will have that money protected moving forward. Another interesting development that FDR is going to introduce within the first weekend that he's president is the fireside chat. So presidents have always kind of used the bully pulpit, being able to use their fame, their influence to be able to give addresses to the American public. These addresses are usually through speeches that are then going to be rebroadcast at a later date. FDR is the first to use the popular medium of radio. He's going to talk directly to the American public. This was not available to previous presidents other than like Wilson, Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover. But those presidents didn't actually go on the radio to talk directly to the American people. FDR is going to make this a very informal setting. He's not going to talk to the people of the country as if he's better than them. He's going to talk to them as if he is going through the same problems, the economic hardships that they're going through. The American public sees this as a president, a leader who really understands what the average American is going through. He's going to reassure them that things will improve, that his programs will be successful. Over the course of his presidency, FDR is going to deliver 30 of these fireside chats. And they are one of the reasons why FDR is such a popular and successful president. In the first 3 months, in the first 100 days that he's president, 15 new laws are going to be enacted through Congress. And we call these 15 laws the New Deal. There are 3 goals of the New Deal: relief, recovery, and reform. Relief programs are immediate need. They are creating jobs, trying to give money or to provide job opportunities to people unemployed. So essentially, they are a Band-Aid for the problem. Like, how do you immediately solve, or at least not necessarily solve the problem, but how do you immediately stop things from getting worse? So providing these job opportunities through these relief programs are going to at least put a Band-Aid on the issue. Recovery programs are going to be more long-term. How do you get the economy started once again? Not jobs programs, but how do you fix problems within industries? How do you help farmers in agricultural fields? So these recovery programs are more planning in the next year to 2 years to 5 years. In other countries, these are going to be referred to as 5-year plans. The United States doesn't have a timetable on them. They're just recovery programs, trying to improve what is broken. And then finally, you have reform. Reform programs are long-term. They're not just trying to solve the immediate crisis of the Great Depression. They're trying to look at the underlying factors which led to the Depression, fixing the problems to prevent any future issues from ever arising like this again. So they are going to be more of a societal change, or they're going to at least be system changes where they're going to implement new rules and regulations in industries to make sure that this never happens to the country again. So that's the main difference between relief, recover, and reform. Relief is immediate. Recovery is going to be more planning in the short term. Reform is long-term change. And you can kind of see here. So first you have the relief programs. The relief are jobs programs, and the 3 that you need to know are the Civilian Conservation Corps, the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, and the Works Progress Administration. Now, for all of these New Deal programs, you can see in the left column there that they're introduced. You've got the initials. They're kind of known as the alphabet programs: the CCC, the TVA, the FERA, the AAA, the NRA, the PWA, the FDIC. All of these programs are going to be mainly kind of broken down into these alphabet mnemonics so that you can kind of understand them. But also, you need to be aware of whether they're a relief program, a recovery program, or a reform. So relief, again, is providing immediate need. CCC and WPA are works programs, providing job opportunities. The CCC was mainly for single men. It only paid $1 a day, but it wasn't meant to be a major earner. It was meant mainly to help people so that they weren't homeless, living on the street, begging for food. These were programs just to get people working again, and they were mainly meant for single young men. They were conservation programs, so like creating public parks, planting trees, building public works, things that are going to benefit society as a whole. The Works Progress Administration is going to be more of a construction administration. So they're building public utilities, hospitals, schools, airports. They're also going to hire people, artists and musicians, people that are going to help American culture flourish and kind of identify the issues of the time period to record them for posterity. So the WPA is very important. And then the last one is the Federal Emergency Relief Administration. Think of that as like welfare. So the government providing aid to local governments, to states, to try to get them back on their feet. If you look at what's currently happening in the United States, the federal government is creating a stimulus bill, kind of like as we speak, to try to help Americans that are coping with the economic collapse that coronavirus has brought upon our society. So the government stepping in, creating these programs, immediate relief, money to help people overcome the obstacles. At that time, it was the Great Depression. And you can see here some of these programs. You have the CCC poster. You've got posters from the WPA that are like the Federal Writers Project. You have other groups here that are providing like concerts, and you have the Tennessee Valley Authority, which is not a relief program. I'm going to get to that in the next slide. Sorry. Recovery. Come on. I got them all. There we go. Okay. Recovery programs. So these are going to be trying to fix industries, trying to see what the major issues within those industries are and try to improve those conditions. So these are more short-term plannings for the road ahead, trying to make sure they stabilize prices of goods, trying to get workers back on the job. The two of the industrial recovery programs are the National Recovery Administration, not the gun NRA, but the National Recovery Administration. NRA is going to be focusing on creating production codes, wages, prices, working conditions. A lot of working conditions today, like the minimum wage or how many hours a week, the traditional 8 hours a day, 40-hour work week, that was established by the National Recovery Administration. The Public Works Administration, kind of like the WPA, is going to be construction projects. The PWA is going to create a hydroelectric dams. You can look at Niagara Falls in Western New York. The hydroelectric dam that basically powers all of upstate New York was created by the PWA. Schools, aircraft carriers, once World War II breaks out, and then creating deep water ports. You could see it in Philadelphia. That was not traditionally a port city, is going to be opened up. Washington, D.C. is going to have a deep water port that's going to be created by the PWA as well on the Potomac River there. The farming community is going to benefit from the Agricultural Adjustment Act, the AAA. Basically, the government is going to pay farmers not to grow certain products, which is a weird thing. Usually you wouldn't have farmers not do something and pay them to do that. But what this is going to do is it's going to limit the surplus of farm goods. It's going to cut back on how much stuff is available, which is going to increase the price and benefit farmers as a whole. any surplus that currently is in circulation was going to be bought up by the government, and the government was going to use that for its own stockpiles. In a lot of cases, they actually got rid of some of their surpluses, and they did that mainly to stabilize the price of goods. Rural Electrification Administration, it's pretty self-explanatory, providing electricity to more rural communities, because even in the 1930s, there were many parts of the country, about 25% of the country, did not have electricity. So this is going to be providing low-cost electricity. And you kind of see that nowadays with like broadband and providing Wi-Fi and internet connection to a lot of more rural areas of the country. The last one is the Tennessee Valley Authority. If I can get rid of this thing, it won't go away. The Tennessee Valley Authority is going to create a specific electrification network in the Tennessee Valley. That's really all you have to know about that. The last group of programs are the reform programs. The reform programs are going to be long-term fixes to make sure we never have problems again. And the ones that we're really going to focus on are the banking industry and the stock market. So the stock market, one of the issues that led to the stock market collapse was that people were buying stocks on margin. So that's going to be outlawed. You also have a lot of people that were speculating, doing risky trades, and they were kind of getting insider information before the general public had knowledge of things that were going on. So people were buying and selling stocks based on this insider trading. So the Truth and Securities Act is going to ban that. And you have the Security Exchange Commission that's going to regulate the stock market. And so nowadays, whenever the stock market is volatile, if it goes too low on a given day, percentage-wise, then the stock market automatically goes to a halt to let people stop panicking so much, they calm down, and then usually that'll stabilize the price of stocks moving forward. So the Security and Exchange Commission is going to oversee the stock market to prevent any future crashes from happening. And we've kind of seen that in the last couple of weeks. We've seen a number of times when the SEC had to step in to stop trading on the stock market to stabilize things. And actually in the last couple of days, you've seen a return to profits and people improving the overall stock prices. The last thing I want to talk about is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. So I did mention this with the bank holiday, just to give you a little bit more in-depth information. Before, if you had your money in a bank, it was not guaranteed that you would get your money back. Where this new program will guarantee through the government that if a bank fails or if anything happens to a bank, your money within that bank will still be insured, that you are guaranteed up until $250,000. If you have more than that, you might want to spread your money between banks, or at least between bank accounts. Don't store more than that within one account. And I think I'm going to stop right there. Thank you for listening, and I hope that this was helpful to you. I will talk to you tomorrow with the response to the New Deal. Have a good day.